Good evening and welcome to this special edition of SUTV.
We're going to take a look at how women were involved during the railroad and their construction.
Thanks for tuning in to SUTV. I'm Joe Lutz.
And I'm Matt Kleindienst.
As history has shown, women usually get the short end of the stick. Dionna Webster has the story.
In the 19th century, railroads were considered to be dangerous and the men were able to ride the railroad. There were specific measures taken to make it safe for women to ride on the railroad.
Locally here in Shippensburg, or in Carlisle, when the Cumberland Valley Railroad made its first maiden voyage, only men were allowed on the train because it was considered not a ladylike thing for women to be on the train. And then the next day, they made a special excursion just for women so that they could experience the train without the danger of men along with them.
Railroads would set up separate women's cars at the back of the train, exclusively for women.
And it's interesting looking through some of the newspapers from the early 20th century when groups would set up excursions like going to Washington, D.C. or going to an amusement park. The railroads would put in their special advertisements that there would be a special ladies' car provided so women could go along but not mix with those unsavory men on the train.
For SUTV News, I'm Dionna Webster.
Women maintained cleaning duties at least until the start of the Civil War, that is. Sasha Gunter has the story.
Women started working on the railroads in the 1850s, and as time progressed, they were assigned more male-oriented jobs.
So women initially were limited to primarily cleaning railroad cars. Over time, women moved into some other kinds of jobs, mostly clerical jobs, working in the offices, sometimes selling tickets, but most often in the back office of railroads and continuing to clean them. What changed really was during the wars. During the Civil War, there were increased opportunities for women to do more jobs that had been filled by men on the railroad. That really expanded again during the First World War and expanded even further during the Second World War.
Not only were women segregated from males on the railroad, but there were also morality laws that could prevent them from riding the train.
The railroad was trying to prevent women from riding on the railroad if they were considered to be women of bad morals. And it actually went to court, and when the court heard the case, they said that, it was not legal for a railroad to suggest what is the sexual morals of a woman, because that meant every woman who's stepping on the train would be scrutinized for, what's her, morality. However, if they could demonstrate that a woman was of such bad moral character that it would impact the other passengers, then they could put a woman off the trains.
For SUTV News, I'm Sasha Gunter.
Shippensburg native Marian Shirk worked on the railroad 40 years ago. She was one of the few women who worked alongside the men. Dionna Webster has the story.
I started at Amtrak in D.C., where I worked in an office, and needless to say, there were lots of women. I was an auditor for ticket sales. And we moved back to this area, and I applied for a job at Amtrak, and somehow Conrail picked up my application, and I was hired by Amtrak. I was hired as the first woman tower operator since World War II.
A tower operator is the person who gives signals to trains. They give restrictions and track warnings so the trains don't collide. Shirk did not like her job.
I moved into clerical area, and there were still not many women in that area. I worked as a yardmaster clerk. The yardmaster clerk is the one who waybills the cars and checks the contents and the height restrictions. Like you couldn't send a car over 17 feet high through Reading or it would take out a bridge. Mm-hmm. So, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility pretty much in every job on the railroad.
Marianne Shirk says all in all she had a good experience working on the railroad and has stories to last a lifetime. For SUTV News, I'm Dionna Webster.
Several women who studied at the university would ride the railroad daily. They were called the day women. Sasha Gunter has the story.
Women who were single had more time to work on the railroad, opposed to married women who had to care for their children.
When women got married, they often left the workforce. The big exception being that African American women tended to work more often when they were married than white women. So in a lot of cases, the expectation would be that once women were married and had children, they wouldn't be working for the railroad.
Several women who studied at the university would ride the railroad daily. They were called the day women.
There actually were several women who were what they called day women who lived in communities. There was one, they found a ticket from a woman who lived in Carlisle, and she used to take the train down to the university, study to be a teacher, and then she'd take the train home at night. And there was a special setup here on campus for what they called the day women, who would come in on the train, take classes, and then go home in the evening.
For SUTV News, I'm Sasha.
Joining us on this week's special edition of SUTV, I'm Joe Lutz.
I'm Mac Lindens. Have a great Thanksgiving break. We'll see you next time.